So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we're filming at the formerly Cablevision Studios, now Alt Studios in Hauppauge, Long Island, New York. As many of you know, a lot of the shows that I do are about divorce, about corruption, about all the bad things in here on Long Island. And I do talk a lot about bad judges and many times about bad attorneys. And make no mistake about it, there's a lot of piece of shit attorneys out there, and really the scum of the attorneys, in my opinion, tend to, a lot of them go to family law. But as many as there are bad ones, there are a lot of good ones that actually go into it for the right reason. And one of the things we'll talk about today is the problem is, how do you know which is the right attorney? Because I tell people the best salesmen on earth are attorneys. Because look, there's a lot of money in there. You're selling yourself, and somebody comes in, especially on a first divorce, they have no idea what they're stepping into. They really don't. And look, an attorney makes his money, from his clients, and a lot of them are unscrupulous, and they tell people what they want to hear. And when you're vulnerable, because you're at one of the worst stages of your life, you're just open to believing whatever people tell you, and you can really be taken advantage of. And like I say, Phil, when you're in the funeral business, there's laws against taking advantage of people because they're coming in such a horrible situation. And a lot of these divorces, a lot of times people are in the same emotional state as when they're losing their marriage. They may be losing their kids, and they're not thinking clearly. Having said that, my next guest is a friend, Phil Jusino, who I met a little over a year ago, and I really respect Phil, not only because he's a very smart, intelligent man, knows his law, but he fights for his client, doesn't take advantage of them, and is not afraid to speak out, which we'll talk about in the show. I'm just going to read a little bit about my guest, Phil Jusino, and then we'll get into a book that he wrote, Divorce: A Practical Guide, which is a book that everybody should definitely read who's thinking about divorce or is involved in a divorce. Very simple book. We'll talk about it. Very, very easy to read, and you can get this on Amazon.com. Phil Jusino, a 1989 Fordham Law School. Wow, I didn't realize you were that old. Graduate, and this must be treating you well. Is admitted to practice of law in New York, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C., which is pretty unusual. Most of the people here are just admitted to the New York bar. Some are New York and New Jersey, but that he's all three is pretty unusual. Mr. Jusino has served as Suffolk County Assistant District Attorney, a law guardian, adjunct professor at Dowling College, which is no longer there in Oakdale. Mr. Jusino has been in private practice since 1991 and heads the law firm of Phillip Jusino Associates, located in Lake Grove. Mr. Jusino has extensive trial experience and appears on a daily basis in Supreme Court, family court, criminal courts, representing the interests of his clients. He publishes a monthly blog on his website, JusinoLaw.com, that covers his areas of practice. Mr. Jusino's sister, Lisa Jusino Calla, a former assistant county attorney, is an associate in the firm, and his father, Ozzie Jusino, is a paralegal.
I have to make one correction. My sister is now doing educational law for another firm.
Okay.
She doesn't do matrimonial. And
I did get this out of the book, and the book was written 2 years ago.
That's correct. She just left me, but we're still very close. My dad is my paralegal, like you said.
That's awesome.
And one of my daughters is a paralegal at my firm, and she'll be going to law school.
Oh, very, very interesting. Let's start at the beginning. So, what made you write this book?
Many times, people come to me and they say they have questions, and after a while, I hear the same kinds of questions over and over again. And I said to myself, I'm going to write a book. And at first, I was going to write a book with humor. And then as I started writing it, I said, this is very important. Let me focus in on the soup to nuts of what you should do. Step one, get a good attorney. If you're going for a custody case, stay off of Facebook. Social media can get you in trouble. What you should do, how you marshal your assets. Those are the kinds of things that you need to do. And I started writing it chapter by chapter. And if you look at the chapters, it starts to welcome to the divorce process. And it ends with, yes, there is life after the divorce.
Right. And what I liked about the book, there are a lot of books. I mean, if you Google divorce on Amazon, there's going to be hundreds of books. And But there's all different levels. I mean, I would read a book after being in the divorce system for 11 years, and I know all these terms that are out there. But what I liked about this book, first of all, I read it in 2 days, so it's an easy read.
It is.
I'm not a big reader, but it just straight to the point. Didn't have a lot of fluff in it, and it was just very simple and easy read, easy to comprehend. You didn't use a lot of the big fancy words.
I avoided that. Right?
You could get into so much detail about every little thing, but you didn't. You basically just kept it simple. And this is also a guide to using an attorney. A lot of the books that I see are how to represent yourself in court. And I got to tell you, a lot of people get into a lot of damn trouble reading stuff on the internet. And they tell you, go into court and tell them that you don't. I just had a guy recently who went into court and said, I read on Facebook that I don't have to give the judge jurisdiction over me in my divorce. And he went into the judge and he said, Judge, I am not giving you jurisdiction over me. And the judge basically said, you are an idiot. And anyway, so a lot of the stuff that you read, it also has to be, in my opinion, it has to be done locally. If you're from New York,
that's right,
you should read a book written by a New York attorney, because people come to Americans for Legal Reform, where I'm the president, from other parts of the country, and between New York and Pennsylvania, it is just a huge world of difference. They call things different.
That's true, and I would say even within the county, if you're in Suffolk County, you're better off getting a good Suffolk County matrimonial attorney. If you're in Nassau, that doesn't mean a Suffolk attorney can't handle a case in Nassau. It just means that you're probably better off getting somebody that knows the players, that knows the judges, that knows the court officers, that knows the attorneys for the children.
Right.
That's very important.
That's very important. So I'm going to go through all that. But I'm going to try to talk fast because we're from New York and we can. We have a lot to cover in a half hour. So first of all, what made you get into this practice of law? I mean, you did criminal law. You were a law guardian. Family law is a miserable freaking place to be. It really.
I'll tell you
what made you get into doing it?
I was an assistant district attorney, and I was put into the domestic violence unit in the district attorney's office here in Suffolk. And pardon I have a little sore throat, so I sound like a frog. And I was handling all kinds of domestic violence cases. And I got to meet all the women's groups, Brighter Tomorrows, Women's Coalition, Focus. And when I left the DA's office, I went to a firm that did criminal work, and that's what I was doing, but they also did matrimonial. And I was getting calls from all the women's groups that I had handled cases for.
Right.
And they said, Phil, do you do matrimonial? I said, well, no, I don't, but... And I started doing family court. I first got into family court. And I was lucky because the firm I worked for did matrimonial. So I learned from them.
Okay.
And then they said to me, Phil, this could be a niche for you because you seem to be getting clients that need you, that respect you, and that remember you when you handle cases for women.
And I actually think it's very important. I tell people this a lot of times. One of the things we talk about is orders of protection, which is sort of a quasi-criminal proceeding. And I tell people, listen, this can ruin your divorce. People say that's not a big deal, it's not criminal. It could ruin your divorce. And just if you get an order of protection, it becomes permanent.
It takes on a life of its own.
That's it. That becomes all you talk about. You're never going to get custody when you got, or it's going to be very hard. You're going to be battling it. So I tell people, spend the money and get a criminal attorney who's experienced in fighting these the criminal way. Because criminal attorneys, listen, your attorney, your client can go to jail.
That's right.
If you're a family lawyer, so what? One person gets screwed every time. So the class isn't always as good. But people who have gone to trial and had somebody facing jail, that's the kind of person I want with an order of protection.
And the thing you got to be careful of with an order of protection is if you get an order of protection in family court or district court, it doesn't matter. It can result in a felony if you violate that order of protection.
If you violate, and that's a trick that a lot of people. A lot of women, I'll say women because more common, they'll get an order of protection, and even if it's not a valid order of protection, while they have this temporary one pending, they call in a violation, and then that violation becomes a big issue. I mean, if you get an order of protection, these are serious.
It is.
Since we're talking about that, I mean, I'm going to jump around a little bit. Tell everybody about the orders of protection, how they're used in divorce, and most importantly, what do you do if you get served with one?
Well, in Suffolk County, you have to serve the person personally. So a sheriff's deputy or the police will actually hand you the order of protection.
Which is a scary thing. I've been served them.
Until you're served, it doesn't take effect.
Okay.
Once you're served, it takes effect. And then once the order is given to you, you generally have a few days before you have to go to court. That's when you should get a good attorney that knows how to handle these cases. Because when you go to court, and like you said before, you can get one even before you know what hit you. It's called ex parte. So your wife can go in, get an order of protection against you. You get served. It's the first time you're saying it. You don't even know there's an order of protection. You go to court. First
and
day,
you get kicked out of your house when a lot of times
they could say to you, we're going to go back,
walk out.
Pick up your belongings and get out. Then the problem you're going to have is if you go to court the first time and you do not have an attorney and you don't know what's going on, what's going to happen is a judge can say, do you want an adjournment? We'll give you a few weeks. You may be out of your house.
Right.
So you might say,
and
well,
not seeing your kids.
Right. You might say, can I handle it today? The judge might say, no, I don't have the ability to try it today. Come back next week. If you're kicked out of your house, you generally get a quicker date.
Right.
If it's a stay away or refrain from, it usually can be longer. But the bottom line is, if you get an order of protection against you, get a good attorney, because when you go in there, if you consent to, let's say, that order of protection, and you don't know what you're doing, you're setting yourself up for potentially a violation that could land you in jail with a felony conviction.
Yeah, and that's very important for my listeners. I beg you, if you get an order of protection, this is one of the places where you have to spend your money, because, as Phil said, they take on a life of their own. And once you're out of the house, first of all, it's not easy to get back in, because everybody's a little hesitant. They say, you know what? And I think most of the judges know that in a divorce case, most of these are BS. But you know what? Sometimes they're not.
Some aren't. I got to be fair.
They don't want to take a chance.
Some are.
You'll be more politically correct than me. But I've seen some people married for 15 years. They never called the police, never had a problem. They get married, now there's an order of protection. Right. And this is a silver bullet to get the guy out of the house.
I'll give you an example. I had a case where I had a criminal trial with a jury. A guy got an order of protection. I wasn't his attorney at the time. Got an order of protection, and it said stay away from the marital residence, which was located in Suffolk County. His wife moved to Florida, and he knew that, so he didn't go back to the house for a while. It became apparent to him his wife wasn't coming back. He decided to move back into the marital residence. She lived in Florida with the child. He's here in New York. He figures nobody's there, why not go back? Right. He goes back to the house. One afternoon, the wife comes back with her family, and she says, I want to move back in. He grabs a few items, hops in his car, drives away, knowing he can't go back. But that wasn't enough. She called the police. It's a technical violation of the order of protection, because it said, stay away from the marital residence located at such and such a location. Right. He was arrested, charged with a felony. We could have worked out a deal. He said, Phil, I want to take a stand. We actually went to trial, had a jury, and he was found not guilty.
Wow, that's great. Now, this is a common thing. What happens if somebody gets an order of protection, and I'm just using it that the woman has it against the man. It definitely can happen the other way, and it does happen the other way. But the woman calls up and says, look, you know what, I made a mistake, because in domestic cases this happens a lot, where they get abused and they call up and then they say, you know what, I forgive you. We were getting divorced. It was mad. You pushed me, but I forgive you. Forget about the order of protection. Come back to the house. The guy comes back, or they meet somewhere. They have a sexual relationship, and then the woman gets pissed the next day. Can they call up the police and say, hey, you violated the order of protection?
They can.
And even though they were invited, it doesn't matter.
I have cases where we want to have a sit-down to settle the divorce case, but I know there's an order of protection. I technically, as an officer of the court, can't permit the parties to be in the same room, because my guy technically is violating the order of protection. There's nothing stopping her from picking up that phone and saying, he looked at me funny.
Right, and it happens.
And if it's a stay away, you can't be near that woman.
Right. So these things are very serious, is what I'm saying. It's not just something to take lightly. You really need to, and again, get an attorney who's experienced in dealing with these orders of protection.
Yes.
And my personal opinion, I don't know how you feel, I'd like to get your opinion on it, is a lot of times when you go to court, they try to push you to settle. They say, look, it's not criminal. You're getting divorced anyway. Who cares if you have to stay away? Just consent to this piece of paper, and you're not going to see you anyway, so who cares? And a lot of times they go, you know what, I'm scared to go to trial because it's going to cost money. I don't know what's going to happen. And they'll sign this consent, and it'll bite them in the ass forever. Okay. What do you think?
In fact, I think we talked a little bit about that last time.
We did on the show, because it's a sore subject.
This is my opinion. When I talk to the client, I say, tell me what happened. Tell me what the situation is. There are times where it's clear that my client did something they shouldn't have done.
Right.
And I try to minimize the damage to them.
Absolutely.
Because with an order of protection, unlike a criminal trial that I just described to you, there's no jury. In a family court order of protection proceeding, it is just a judge.
Right.
So if the judge has a preconceived notion or believes that this guy did something wrong, I know it's an uphill battle.
Right.
And I know my guy might have a credibility issue. What if the other attorney comes to me and says, look, your client gave my client a black eye. And I say to my client, what happened? Well, she pushed me and I punched her. I got to deal with that issue.
Right.
So this might not be the time to have the hearing. It might be where we consent, because if you go for a hearing and you lose, there will be a finding, not a criminal finding, but a finding you did something wrong that can be used in the subsequent divorce agreement.
But here's the way I look at it. If you did do something wrong, and nobody should, I guess that's a different thing. But what do you have to lose if you're going to consent to the stay away? Why not go to trial and take your chance? You have the worst. Isn't the worst? It's not criminal, as you said. The worst case that can happen, other than spending money, is that you still get found guilty and you still have an order of protection.
True. There will be a finding against you, though, because the order of protection will be based on that you did something wrong. So if I have a divorce case
Right.
and I do it on consent, they can't say, well, he did such and such. They could say it, but there's no finding.
But don't they usually say it?
Yes, but I could say there was no finding. Like I didn't make.
So you say
admission.
there is a difference between consenting and being found guilty. There is. It may not be a huge difference, but
the other issue is if these people are trying to repair their relationship, or at least repair it to the extent where they have kids in common, they have to communicate. If you have a knockdown, drag-out battle where I have to cross-examine that woman,
that's it.
Or that guy has, the other attorney has to cross-examine my client, it can get ugly.
Right.
There's also the expense. A hearing
Which
is not
real.
free.
Absolutely. Right.
And a client might say, I really don't have the money. I don't like to make decisions solely on money, but it's a factor.
Now, this is always a tough one, but it's an issue that I have. Are the courts, because a lot of people get divorced, and they'll call me as Americans for Legal Reform, and they'll say, oh, I'm thinking about getting divorced, I'm a father, I want to get custody of my kids. And everybody I talk to tells me that things have changed now and the courts are fair and it's 50-50.
Right.
Are the courts fair or are they biased against dads?
If you have a young child and you have a mother that has been the primary caregiver to that child, that parent will have an advantage, no question. But I've got custody for male clients often. I've had people come to me where the wife was the breadwinner and the father was home with the child in role reversal.
Right.
They got custody. So there's no law that says that the woman should get custody. I'll be honest with you. The younger the child, the more I would say the woman has an advantage.
Right.
If you're talking about a 5-year-old or an infant even.
Right.
As the child gets older, they're going to have more say in where they're going to go.
Right.
If you have a 15-year-old kid and he says, I want to live with my dad, as long as he can articulate a reason, not because dad lets me do whatever I want to do.
Right.
If he can say, dad understands me, dad takes care of me, dad listens to me, that 15-year-old in all likelihood will go to dad.
Right. I often hear people again come to me and they'll tell me, I want to hire a pit bull lawyer because maybe their spouse cheated on them, but everybody hears, I want a nastiest son of a bitch lawyer that I can get. What is your opinion? Should somebody get? You're not a nasty guy. You do very well. You do very well in court.
I can be aggressive when I need to be,
Right.
but I think you want to first of all try to get an attorney that your personalities blend.
Right.
Because if you want a pit bull, if that's what you want,
Right.
and you have an attorney that's not a pit bull, you're going to be expecting him to do things that he's not going to do. I'll give you an example. People say, well, I want you to go in there and be angry. Do you think for 1 second I'm going to go in and yell at a judge because a client wants me to be a pit bull?
Right.
No. Now,
some will.
well, some may, and you know what? They may not do too well because there's no jury here, don't forget.
Right.
So if you go in there and you do that, the judge might say, who the hell does this guy think he is?
Right.
Now, there's times when I go to trial and I have to really go after a witness. That's being aggressive. That's fine. Right. I'm going after a litigant, not the judge,
Right.
not the court personnel, not the attorney for the child. So when you say I want a pit bull, get somebody that is going to be aggressive to the extent they need to be.
Right. Because you know some attorneys, they go in, I'll tear your ex apart, I'll chew, and some people love that. But I don't see that they do very well in court.
Right. No.
Yeah, it's performing. They see them in the hallway. You see them.
Performing,
and they go out in the hallway in front of their client. They want to see you be so nasty to their spouse. And they, oh, it's great. You should see what my lawyer did. It means nothing.
I've had clients come to me and say, I don't like the fact that you're talking to that other attorney.
I just wrote a note on that because that was another comment.
In a friendly way.
Right.
Like, let's say you came in after the Super Bowl. You might talk to the attorney and say, that was some great game. Right. That doesn't mean I'm going to let that attorney walk all over me. Right. That just means that I'm a pleasant guy and I can communicate with these people.
And honestly, being able to work with the other attorney is the only way you're going to be able to settle. If you guys hate each other...
That could save a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are cases here, and you could talk to litigants and other attorneys, where they say, so-and-so is on the case. Oh, God, I think I better ask for a higher retainer. Now, that doesn't mean that attorney is great and going to get the results. It's just they're a pain in the butt.
Right.
And there are other attorneys, I would hope like myself, that they'll say, oh, good, he'll fight for his client, but he's going to tell his client. That's why I wrote this book, to say, look, you may not want to give your wife half your pension, but that's the law.
Right.
You might not want to give your husband alternate weekends, but that's the law.
Right.
If he's entitled to it.
Right.
So you want realistic expectations, and that's why one of the chapters here is talk about realistic expectations. And sometimes you have to change your expectations. You might have an expectation that you're going to get $1 million. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client one time where I worked out a deal where she would get about $2 million. There was about a $4.5 million estate. She wanted half. But in New York State, it's equitable distribution.
Which explains that, because a lot of people think that means
Sure.
50-50.
No, that means they look at, are the assets marital? So let's say I have $5 million and I marry a woman and we stay married for a year. We get divorced. She's not walking away with $2.5 million.
It's not equitable, it's not fair.
It's not equitable. Things we amass together, of course. So in the example, I worked out a deal. I said, you can get about $2 million. And she says, well, why can't I get more than that? Why can't I get half? And she wasn't happy because he had a girlfriend on the side. Right. So it was more, she wanted to stick it to him. Right. And I said, if you go to trial, you're not going to do that well. You're not going to get what I'm getting you now. The husband didn't want to roll the dice, and he wanted to save money. Right. And he didn't want to have to pay my attorney's fees. Right. And he had a very good attorney. The guy was president of the Nassau Bar at the time. Okay. And the client ended up firing me. She said, I think you should be more aggressive. And I said, fair enough. She went and hired another attorney, a very aggressive attorney. They went to trial. I get the decision sent to me by mistake, right? And I look at it, and do you know how much she got? She got a little less than $1 million. And
spent.
I could only imagine what the trial cost her.
And the aggravation.
And she didn't get attorney's fees because the court felt she was being unreasonable because they looked at it and they said, they're not really supposed to take into consideration any kind of pleas or any kind of arrangements, but the court said, this is what you're entitled to. And the court knew the deal we were working out. And again, you're not dealing with a jury that doesn't know what's going on.
Of course, yeah.
So the judge is saying to himself, Mr. Jusino could have got you $2 million, and you went to trial and you got less than $1 million? Right. And why should I give you attorney's fees? You didn't have to spend all this money.
Exactly. Well, that's good when the judge actually does the right thing.
So that's why it goes to listen to. If you get an attorney you trust, listen to that attorney.
Because it is a problem. People talk to their friends, and they always have the story of the woman who divorced the guy and is now driving a brand new car and destroyed him. First of all, most of these are nonsense. A lot of times it's just talk because people don't tell you they're intimate.
A lot of the stuff is malarkey.
But you always hear about these deals. Oh, this one got such an amazing deal, and of course there are people who get screwed.
There are.
But a lot of the times people are making up the story. You know, they're inflating it. You know, I pay $6,000 a month child. So they make up crazy numbers. We don't have too much time, and I have so much stuff to go over. And again, you can look in the book and get a lot of information, and then you have consultations. Talk about social media because you write a lot about that in the book, important. And you talk about it every time we meet.
That's right.
And I think I read something like over 70% of divorces now, Facebook is mentioned somewhere in the divorce.
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked, but I also have a different take on it. Not that it causes divorces, and that's true.
Right.
But if you're going through a custody battle, the stupidest thing you can do is post pictures of your kid on Facebook, is to make disparaging remarks about your spouse or your mother-in-law or your father-in-law. I've won custody cases because people have posted dumb things on Facebook that came back to haunt them.
And it's an interesting time because when you're going through a divorce, you want to be able to vent. So I think even, it sort of makes it like, this is your way of telling your side of the story because when you're in court, you have an attorney, you feel like, hey, I'm not telling my side. But it's not the place to do it. But as you're saying, so it's not the place to do it. And you counsel people, what do you say, disable your account, hide your,
just
like they did with Donald Trump with Twitter last week.
They took his Twitter account away. There was a reason. He was getting himself in trouble. These people, I won a custody case because a woman in family court, this wasn't a divorce, family court, posted, I was hungover again this weekend. And my client showed it to me and I said, I got one question for you. Who had the kid that weekend? Because if it was his weekend, it wasn't smart to post it, but it still wasn't the end of the world. He said it was hers. So I said to the other attorney, I said, before we start the trial, can you talk to your client and ask her who had the kids that particular weekend? She came back and said, my client. I said, did she have her mother over to watch the kids? No, no, no. It came down to this child was not supervised for a period of time when this mom was hungover.
Are they presentable into evidence? Are they subpoenaable?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So somebody gets printed out and go in with it, and somebody who would authenticate that post?
Some judges are very lenient and will allow almost anything in.
And I tell people in family court, when they go, oh, this is not the rules. I go, there are no rules in family court because every judge is different, and they can, especially when there's kids involved, they can use that as a reason. You know.
But you could say it came from this person's Facebook account, even a tweet, even a text.
Right.
If you could show it came from that particular number.
How could you show that it wasn't altered? Or?
Well, you could take a photograph of it, and you can question. You could say to the other side, "Is that your?" Now they could lie, but they're setting themselves up for a perjury charge.
Right.
Because let's say they lie about that, and then I subpoena the records, and it clearly shows. Right. So most people don't lie when they're shown a document.
Okay.
They may lie otherwise.
Right.
But if you say, "Is that your tweet?" or "Is that your?" Yeah, that's mine, but I didn't really mean to send it, or I was joking around. I didn't mean it. If you're doing that, stay off of social media. I've had clients take photographs of kids. I had one took a picture of a kid in a dog cage. Now, my kid was little, would crawl into the dog cage. They took a picture. The judge was not happy.
You never know what people think.
Didn't lose custody over it, but the judge says, don't be posting. I said to my client, don't post. If you have any doubts, don't post it.
Right. Let me ask you, because I have so much to ask you, but a couple quick things. Moving out of the house. Right. A lot of times somebody gets served with the divorce and they'll say, you know what, move out of the house. The attorney will try to get him out. And I don't know if this is old school, but I was always told, if you were fighting for custody, don't move out of the house.
Right.
What's your opinion on that?
If you are fighting for custody and you move out and you're out for a period of time, it's going to be much harder for you to get custody because you're going to say, I'm a much better parent. Why did you leave? And I don't think that other parent could take care of the child like I can. Well, who took care of the child while you were living?
And if you thought the person's dangerous, why'd you leave him?
Especially if you're going to say that lady is crazy,
drunk, or they party all the time.
Well, why did you leave? So if you're fighting for custody, stay in the house.
And when you're in the house, of course, it's a volatile environment. But I tell people, and I don't know if you agree, tell me, never be around the person without a tape recorder in your pocket because something's going to explode.
I've given that advice in the past. It's unfortunate you have to do that because who wants to live like that?
It's a horrible way to live. I lived for 3 years but what's your advice on it? Do you think, yes,
I would say, I would say if the other person is dishonest and is going to try to lie and get you in trouble, you do what you have to do. Because, listen, if you're both walking around with tape recorders, you're going to be fine.
It's the best thing. I think if they both do it. Because I tell people, don't think your ex does not, or your spouse, if they went to a lawyer, they're probably recording.
Have a GoPro and a tape recorder,
it's crazy.
You'll be fine.
Everybody's walking around, but you know what? I've had a lot of people catch stuff that really saved their ass.
Oh,
Instead
I have too.
He said, she said situation. Parental alienation. How does somebody deal with parental alienation, which is one parent turning them against the other?
Right.
And I think it's very common.
It is.
And especially because of the way the law guardians or the attorney for the child, I believe that made this situation worse because their job now is to do what their client, the child, wants. So if you're a parent and you do a good job and you get your kid to say, I don't like mommy or I don't like daddy, now you got the law guardian who's supposed to fight for that person. So to me, this thing even makes alienation worse.
It is an extremely difficult area of the law because most people don't want to believe that a parent will say to their child, you don't like daddy, do you? And assuming there's no alcohol or drugs or abuse or anything like that. And sometimes you need forensics. Because if I'm saying one thing and the other attorney is saying something else, the law guardian is going to say, this is what the kid told me. Right. And that law guardian, like you said, will fight for that child, but will fight for the child in a way that is alienating the other parent.
Right, that's a horrible. A lot of people. Listen, it happens a lot. Now you feel like you have that person going against you, your spouse's attorney going against you. It's two against one.
Let's be honest. It is hard to prove.
It's very hard.
How do you prove? Because daddy or mommy are not going to say those things in front of anybody else.
Right.
They're going to call the kid aside or at home at night. You don't like your dad, and it could be subtle.
It's also subtle. I think it's not. Hey, don't say.
Right.
Like
subtle's even harder.
Your dad's on the phone. Your dad's on the phone. They call him by the first name. John's on the phone. And
subtle could be harder because the child might not even realize what's going on.
A lot of times
if you said your dad's the devil, that kid may say to the law guardian, "What'd your mom say about your dad? Oh, he's the devil." Right. And then it's blown wide open.
Right.
But if it's more subtle, well, your dad doesn't want to see you. The kid might not realize what mom's doing.
Do you help fight it though, Phil? If somebody comes to you and says, my ex is turning my kids against me, a lot of attorneys say, I think nothing I could do about it. Suffolk County courts do not care about alienation.
I do. I have a case. In fact, I won't even say when it's on. I don't want anyone to get the idea I'm giving information out. But I have a case coming up where we ordered forensics because we believe, and even the law guardian is saying, I think these kids want to see dad, but they don't want to say that to their mom. Right. So the mom is saying the kids don't want to see dad. We ordered forensics. And forensics really bore out that these kids really want to see their dad. Right. And it's the way for the judge, because don't forget, I'm partial. Right, I'm partial to my client. Yeah. And even the law guardian, in a sense, is partial for their client. But this particular judge now saw the report and said, now I see. Right. So in a sense, my client was vindicated. But we had to spend money and do forensics.
And my opinion on alienation is you got to hit it hard at the beginning. Throw all your resources at it, because if it goes, the courts tend to let these things go on for so long, and if it goes on for a year, 2 years, 3 years,
it's much harder to reverse it.
Even if you win, you don't win because the damage is so. But at the beginning, if you see it, try to nip it in the bud. You may not win.
And it's a very sad thing. I've represented clients who are friends, and they don't see their kids anymore. And as they get older, it's tragic.
Very sad. Phil, thank you very much. Thank you for all you do, being an advocate, and we have so many other things. If people want to ask a question, you do consultations?
I give a free consultation.
Free
Call
is
my
good.
office.
Okay, great. And you can, like I said, get the book on Amazon. It's got
or
some
my website,
great
JusinoLaw.com, or they can call me at...
And what about your radio show? You do a radio show
yes,
also?
I do. Every Tuesday night, WLANY, I do a radio show with Frank Vetro. It's called Standing Up Principle. I also do a show at 9 o'clock called The Right Perspective with a man named Ed Villebig from Atlanta, my old college roommate. So you can tune in. It's WLINY.com. Go to live stream and you can see the show.
Great, great. Thanks again. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us, Long Island Backstory. Please like us on Facebook and share it, especially a show like this where so much useful information is given out.
Long Island Backstory.